Namaskar. Welcome back to the Board of Open Schooling and Skill Education, Sikkim. Class is History. Lesson is India and the World Through the Ages, Module 1. And the topic is on Modern World, Part 1, Session 4. Okay. Now, from the 14th century onwards, Europe witnessed many profound changes in the history and in the cultural and intellectual life that helped to usher in the modern period. This was the period of Renaissance. We had about two things during this particular period: Renaissance and the Reformation in Europe. The awakening. Renaissance meant the awakening that encouraged thinking and reasoning in social and political fields and affected every aspect of life. A period of rationality and scientific inquiry had already begun in the Arab world, but the changes that took place during the Renaissance in Europe affected the entire world. These changes began with the disintegration of the feudal system. You remember reading about, discussing the feudal system in the earlier lesson, about which you have already read in the previous lesson. In this lesson, we will discuss some of these changes and developments which transformed medieval society into the modern world. We'll also trace the events that took place in the modern world till the 20th century. Okay, now we will see what are the learning objectives. We will, after completing this lesson, you should be able to, you know what this means? That after I have discussed this lesson with you, you should be in a position to discuss the impact of decline of feudalism, explain the meaning and features of Renaissance, explain the causes of Reformation and its impact, describe the development of science, and mention the main scientific discoveries of the age and some of the major voyages of discovery. Now, we will also learn certain learning objectives of this, explain significance of the Industrial Revolution for Europe and the rest of the world, explain the causes and effects of the American Revolution and the French Revolution, discuss the struggle for national unification of Germany and Italy, and examine the growth of socialist ideas and Russian Revolution. Now, we start with the impact of the decline of feudalism. Now, during the medieval ages, one of the most important institutions was feudalism. And you have read about it in detail in the previous lesson, so I need not go into it. And feudalism as an institution flourished in Europe in many centuries. But with the rise of the middle class, it started to decline, and rise of powerful kingdoms started taking place. Emergence of new towns and cities also came up. These towns were centers of production and were governed by electoral representatives. The atmosphere of the towns was free from feudal restrictions and control, as well as people were free to go anywhere and to take up any profession. Towns attracted artisans and peasants from rural areas. These towns and cities encouraged the production of many crops, such as cotton and sugarcane. Peasants were paid in cash for the production. The manufacture of goods was sold in the markets, where money was the medium of exchange. The lords began to accept money from the vessels instead of services, as they also needed money to buy various luxurious commodities. This led to the rise of a powerful merchant class. They now began to aspire for a higher status in the social hierarchy. They began to support the powerful monarchs, to undermine the position of the feudal lords, which weakened the feudal structure and led to the decline of the feudal manor. Now, the infusion of new ideas created a new awakening. This gave birth to a new movement called the Renaissance, and we will discuss this in this particular lesson. The modern period ushered the age of faith and the beginning of the age of reason. It witnessed movements like the Renaissance and the Reformation. And these movements brought in many changes in cultural, intellectual, religious, social, and economic, political field of the life of the people. This period is also characterized by urbanization, faster means of transport and communication, democratic systems, and uniform based on equality. The literal meaning of the Renaissance, as I told you earlier, event or rebirth or reawakening. It started in Italy around the 4th century AD Italy was divided into small city-states at that particular time. Many of them were built on the ruins of the of the ancient Roman buildings. The geographical position of Italian cities made them great trading and intellectual centers. Moreover, the position of Italian cities such as Venice made them centers of trade and intellectual crossroads. Many great ideas along with the wealth were brought by merchants from far corners of the globe. The new forms of political and social organization which took place gave political freedom and a suitable atmosphere for academic, artistic, and cultural advancement. People had now more leisure times. As I told you earlier, that more production meant less people to be involved in growth of food production. So that means it left a larger number of people who had nothing to do on the agricultural fields. So they started doing other things of art, craft, literature, literary works, and various others. This was also a period of great economic expansion. Many commercial and financial techniques were developed for trade practices like bookkeeping, bills of exchange, and public debt. This new mercantile society was less hierarchical and more concerned with secular objectives. It was in sharp contrast to the earlier rural tradition-bound society. The major developments of this time were the revival of urban life, commerce based on private capital, banking formation of nation states, exploration to find out new routes and territories, and the development of vernacular literature, which was popularized by the printing press. Now, the adventurers and the explorers played a significant role in opening a world economic system. Many new commodities were brought from America, Asia, and Africa after the discovery of trade routes. These goods enriched the life of Europeans and inspired them to develop new ways of producing them in larger numbers to make profit. The result was that merchants, entrepreneurs, and bankers joined hands, and capital came to enjoy an important position in the political life as well as in relation with other countries. Now, the new ideas that were generated in this period, like humanism, rationalism, and the spirit of inquiry, brought profound changes in the thinking pattern of the people. There was a renewed interest in the cultural achievements of the classical Greeks and the Romans. Humans became the central concern of the new scholars. They believed in the creative potential of the human beings and their right to seek joy and pleasures in the whole world, in the world itself. This was contrary to the belief of the medieval church, which opposed worldly pleasures. This respect for human beings encouraged interest in art, history, language, literature, ethics, etc. Do you know that it was at this time that the discipline grouped under humanities were born? Now, the spirit of humanism found expression in the field of art and literature. The greatest achievement of Renaissance artists were in the field of paintings. Painters studied the anatomy and proportion of the human bodies. Earlier, it was just stick painting. They wanted the human beings to be painted in realistic forms and proportion. Some of the outstanding artists were Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Botticelli, and Titian. Even in the field of sculpture, artists began to make free-standing statues. These sculptures now stood apart from the buildings or background and were separate works of art. The first great Renaissance sculptor was Donatello, who made the statue David. The Renaissance spirit also marks the rise of nationalism in Europe. People now began to free themselves of medieval religious restrictions and bonds. National identities grew stronger, and thus this was reflected in the developments of modern European languages such as Italian, Spanish, French, German, English, and etc. as the languages of literature. Now the writers used local languages in poetry, drama, prose, etc. instead of Latin. The works of Renaissance authors became accessible to a large number of people due to the use of vernacular language and the introduction of printing press. The Bible was printed and read by a large number of people. Several works that were produced in modern European languages were Dante's Divine Comedy, Erasmus, In Praise of Folly, Machiavelli's The Prince, and Cervantes' Don Quixote. Now, two major developments also took place during this time. The first was the Protestant Reformation, and which resulted in the split in Christianity. And the second development concerned reforms within the Roman Church, generally referred to as Catholic Reformation or Counter-Reformation. Reformation was a part of the socio-economic and social, religious, and political movement which led to the emergence of the modern world. Now we come to Reformation, where it says explain the causes of Reformation and its impact. The medieval church came to be associated with superstitions, corruption, and greed for money. Superstitious peasants were convinced by the church that it possessed the true cross. People were used to paying fees for seeing a piece of wood at the cross because it was believed that sacred relics had healing power. The church laid more emphasis on blind faith than reason, as it was a mean to extracting money from the devotees. All this changed with the coming of the Renaissance. In the new spirit of the Renaissance, nothing could be accepted. Do you know that it was in 1517 AD that a German priest called Martin Luther first challenged the authority of the Roman Catholic Church? According to him, Bible was the only source of religious authority. He believed that salvation could be attained through faith in Jesus Christ instead of having blind faith on the church. He protested against some practices of the Roman Catholic Church, such as the selling of positions in the church, the issuing of the letters of indulgence for works of charity, or going on crusades to the highest bidder. Luther had the protection of the German princes, primarily because of the desire to seize church property. But on 3rd January 1521, he was excommunicated by Pope Leo X after he refused to stop writing against the church. Now, Luther's views started the Protestant Reformation in the West, and it divided the Christian world into two, the Protestant and the Roman Catholics. According to him, Christians must win salvation by following Christ and not by buying letter of indulgence. Though the Reform movement in England was influenced by Lutheran ideas, the English Reformation occurred as a direct result of King Henry VIII's efforts to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister, helped the parliament to pass the Act in Restraint of Appeals, an act of supremacy. It gave a royal headship to the king over the church. The king was allowed to marry Anne Boleyn, a commoner. Now, the Reformation proved to be a great upheaval for religious revival. A reform movement also took place within the Catholic Church. This is known as the Counter-Reformation. It aimed to reduce corruption as well as to improve and strengthen the Catholic Church. It began in Spain, where Ignatius Loyola founded the Society of Jesus, which stressed upon services of God, charity, chastity, and missionary work. The movement started by Martin Luther spread to other countries of Europe through the efforts of King Henry VIII of England. Now, Hulde, Zwingli, and John Calvin. Now, we come to the next, and that was the development of science. Now, during the Renaissance, extraordinary accomplishments were made in the field of science. See how many developments are taking place in the first part of the modern world. Renaissance, the Reformation, and then in the church, and then the Counter-Reformation again in the church, and finally we have come across what is known as the development of science. During the Renaissance, extraordinary accomplishments were made in the field of science. We have already read that Renaissance thinkers emphasized more in reason than on blind faith and stressed the knowledge that knowledge could be gained by observation and experimentation. They rejected blind faith in tradition and established beliefs. This resulted in a scientific inquiry that had almost disappeared by the time. The Renaissance also brought about a scientific revolution. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci made observational drawings of anatomy and nature, which was a unique blend of science and art. The period also saw remarkable achievements in medicine and human anatomy. Michael Servetus, a Spanish doctor, discovered the circulation of blood. William Harvey, an Englishman, explained the function of the heart in purifying blood and its circulation through the veins. The beginning that was made by the Renaissance scientists paved the way for observation and experimentation in other fields of knowledge also. Now, one of the remarkable achievements of the Renaissance in science was the field of astronomy. Have you heard of Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo? They were great astronomers who formulated and tried to prove that the Earth revolves around the sun. Before the Renaissance, it was believed that the sun revolved around the Earth, and whoever questioned this was denounced as heretic. Copernicus, in his book on the revolution of the heavenly sphere, argued that the Earth and the planets moved around the sun. Isn't that right? The Earth and the planet moves around the sun. The sun is static and in concentric circles. Even though the theory was imperfect, it aroused thinking and reasoning. Kepler further developed this theory and said that the other planets move in elliptical paths around the sun. He also argued that magnetic attractions between the sun and the planets kept the heavenly bodies in an orbital motion. Further on this assumption, Isaac Newton developed his law of universal gravitation. With his self-manufactured telescope, Galileo discovered the moons of Jupiter, the rings of Saturn, and spots in the sun. He also confirmed the findings of Copernicus. Renaissance also developed a curiosity in the minds of other Europeans about other lands and other people. Let us find out how this happened. Now, discovery of new lands. The spirit of inquiry encouraged many adventurers to discover new lands. The new trade routes that were discovered changed the history of the world. The new trade routes.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Ma'am, which lesson you read?
Pardon?
Which lesson you read?
I am doing module 1 and lesson is for modern world, part 1.
Part 1, okay.
Got it?
I find, but modern were part 1. Okay, yes.
Yeah. This is, I do not know whether which book you have with you, because the book which I have, now I'm going to talk about the discovery of the discovery of new lands, 3.5.
3.5. Yeah, 1 minute. 4.1.
3.5. The lesson is Modern World 1, part 1. The lesson is in 2 parts. Modern World is in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. And I'm discussing right now, just a minute, part 3.5, discovery of new lands. That is after the Renaissance, the Reformation, and discovery in science. Got it?
Yes.
Have you got it?
3.2. Yes.
Got it? Discovery of new lands?
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm talking about discovery of lands. Please follow me. If you have any problems, just ask me. Okay.
Okay.
I want to make it as easy as I can for you. Right?
Hmm.
Right. What's your name?
Amira.
Amira, where are you from?
Qatar.
Pardon?
Qatar. Qatar.
Katak. Okay, I'm very happy to hear that you are here. You know,
Ma'am.
it makes it more interesting for me because I find that somebody's listening after I'm reading or I make plans for you and I made this PowerPoint presentation. Okay,
Okay.
good. I'm happy. Now I'm going to talk about the discovery of new lands. Just follow me with the book, and if you have any problem, ask me. All right. Now, the
Okay.
spirit of inquiry encouraged many adventurers to discover new lands. The new trade routes that were discovered changed the history of the world. And you know, one of those discoveries, one of them came over to India also. Remember Vasco da Gama?
Yes.
Right. It is said that God, glory, and gold was the main motive behind these discoveries. But the motive of gold or economic need was the most important. Now, before the geographical discoveries, Europeans obtained articles like spices, cotton, precious gems, silk, etc. from the eastern part of the world. They traveled through the Arabic and Islamic territories for the supply of these articles. This was not very convenient and also proved uncertain. So a direct sea route to Southeast Asia was discovered as it had a potential of a lucrative trade. The explorers also had another motive, which was to convert the people of the newly found areas to Christianity. It also became a means for them to serve God. You know, they came to India first to discover the lands. They discovered during this time discovery of new routes were taking place at this time. Vasco da Gama landed in India. Primarily, he came in as to trade. Then he started what is known as spreading of Christianity in this area. And finally, when the Portuguese were thrown out, then the Britishers conquered our country and we became slaves of the British Empire. Now, in addition, the adventurers also hope to acquire fame by discovering newer lands. Some did indeed become very famous. Have you ever heard about Vasco da Gama discovering the route to India? And Columbus. Columbus had set out to discover the sea route to India, but he landed in America. Do you know Ferdinand Magellan was the first explorer to lead an expedition around the world? Bartholomew Dias was another famous explorer. Most of them were from Portugal. Why do you think that these great adventurers and voyages were sponsored by kings and wealthy people? The tremendous increase in trade and colonization had a great impact on the enhancement of European wealth. One of the most famous kings who sponsored the voyages was the Portuguese King Henry VIII, who is also known as Harry the Navigator. The technological base for these discoveries came from the invention of the compass, astrolabe, astronomical tables, and the art of map making. These voyages led to the establishment of trading outposts and colonial empires in different parts of Africa, America, and Asia. Now, commercial focus shifted from Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. Many new commodities were added to trade, such as tobacco, molasses, ostrich feathers, potato, etc. It also started inhuman slave trades in America. Slaves were captured from Africa, transported across the Atlantic Ocean, and sold to work in plantations in North America. That is why you find a lot of Africans in America.
Mhm.
Now, these trade practices and new sea routes helped the European merchants to accumulate huge wealth, which they invested in the development of new machines. This led to the coming of the Industrial Revolution, which made them more powerful and wealthy. Because Industrial Revolution brought in new machines, Now, machines could do the work of human beings. Earlier, especially in our country, we had weavers, okay? And these weavers were doing weaving clothes with their own hands on the khadi. But just a minute, let me open on the khadi. But and they were weaving. But when the machines came in, what happened? The weavers who worked for 3 days to manufacture something, to produce something, the machine could do it within a matter of hours. So which do you think would be cheaper? The ones made by the machine or the ones made by hand? Like, obviously, it was the ones made by machines. And so machines took over the work of these artisans, these weavers, craftsmen, and all. Now, because you have joined in, I'm very happy to hear it. Now, in your lesson, you will find that there are small questions which are known as in-text questions. Please go through these in-text questions and read and see the questions, give answers to them. If you are able to do it on your own, it will be good and good. But supposing you are not able to do so, please look for the answers at the back of the lesson. The answers have also been provided uh, at the back. Then, and they'll make you, in fact, they'll make your work very much easier. I haven't come across those questions as yet, but when I do so, I will get back to you, right? Now,
Yes.
we come to the industrial. Now, the activities have also been given. Now, these activities are not for me. They are meant for you to make your reading very much more interesting and your subject interesting and worth doing. Now, on a world map, trace the sea routes taken by Vasco da Gama and Ferdinand Magellan and Christopher Columbus to reach the new destinations, which will give you an idea as to how to read the atlas also. Now we come to the Industrial Revolution. Now the Industrial Revolution began in England from about 1750 AD. This was possible because English merchants had accumulated huge wealth through overseas trade and her colonies secured the supply of raw materials. Now the colonies also acted as potential markets for finished goods. Moreover, England had huge amount of essential resources such as coal and iron, which were necessary for running the industries. Thus, the capitalists invested in the development of new machines to speed up the production. Now, with the aim of earning more profits. Actually, that's what would happen, no? We would have more production. More production meant that more things could go to the market, and they went to the overseas market, which had been just discovered, and things would be sold out there, and the money would be sent back to these countries, and they would become richer. So there were more profits. Now machines began to take over some of the work of humans and animals for production. Though there were new developments and the coming of new machineries to improve production, the society became unequal. It created a division in society with the coming of two groups of people, the capitalist and the bourgeois, and the worker or the proletariat. The capitalist was known as the bourgeois, and the worker was known as the proletariat, the haves and the have-nots, as they were later called. You will read more about the Industrial Revolution in the other coming lesson, because Industrial Revolution is a very important change in our history. Now, if you remember from the Stone Age, then we came to the Chalcolithic Age. From the Chalcolithic Age, we came on to Iron Age, and from Iron Age, now Iron Age is being used. It is the Industrial Revolution has come in the Iron Age. Now, and it's a very important development because all our modern discoveries and innovations and anything which has come in new have come in during in this particular Iron Age, which later came to be known as the Old Industrial Age and the New Industrial Age. Now, see, at the end of the lesson, you have been given in-text questions. You have to choose the correct answer. Who discovered the sea route to India? Bartholomew Dias, Vasco da Gama, Columbus, or none of these. And you know it is Vasco da Gama. So that helps you, isn't it? It helps your learning easier. Now, which of the following was not a result of the voyages of discovery? Setting up of colonies in Asia and Africa, expansion of European commerce, rise in the prosperity of the colonies, or beginning of slave trade. So now you have to find out these answers. If you are able to do so, at the end of the lesson, the answer is given. Name at least two contributions of the Renaissance in the field of science, and list at least three discoveries which helped the Europeans to find new sea routes to the country. Anyway, identify the significant changes in the society due to the Industrial Revolution. Isn't it? It will make your learning much more easier, and it will make you very happy to go and find out more and more about these. Right. Now we come to the age of revolution. Okay, just a minute. I'll just change this. Now these are learning objectives which I normally do at the end of the lesson, right? Now, impact of decline of feudalism we did Renaissance, we did Reformation, we did development of science, discovery of new lands, and Industrial Revolution, and the age of revolutions is going to be we are going to do now. Okay. Now, the European Revolution of 1848 brought a series of political upheavals with their opposition to the traditional authority. There was a very strong dissatisfaction with political leadership, and people started demanding more participation in the affairs of the state. Political awareness also now started increasing. Ideas like liberty, equality, and fraternity were popularized by the printing press. In fact, if you remember the French Revolution, these were the three ideas: equality, liberty, equality, and fraternity. The revolutions which were most important, which occurred in America and France and Germany, Italy, and Russia. In fact, I would like to point out to you that if you really want to make your learning more interesting, do try and get some books. In fact, tomorrow, next class, I'll try and take out some books which I think should help you in making your learning much more interesting. That is, if you are really interested in carrying history forward into the class 12th and even to the graduation level. It's a very interesting subject. And in fact, nowadays, when I open the YouTube, I'm very surprised to see so many topics on history. I wish I had this advantage when I was in school or college, and not now.
Mm.
The revolutions which were most important occurred in America, France, Germany, Italy, Russia, and Britain had already faced a major change with the Glorious Revolution. The United States of America was born after the American War of Independence, and Russia experienced a workers' movement which led to the establishment of a socialist government. These upheavals were accompanied by a feeling of nationalism amongst the population of many states, which had been encouraged by enlightened ideas. Now we are going to read about these revolutions in a little more greater detail. Now we talk about the Glorious Revolution, which occurred in England. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 occurred in England much before the age of the revolutions and proved a source of inspiration for the world. It was called the Glorious Revolution because no blood was shed. A revolution has taken place, a change has taken place, but without shedding any blood to achieve a success. The Stuart King, England had three major dynasties ruling in England. One of them was the Tudor dynasty, then came the Stuarts, and then the Hanoverians. The last emperor, king of England, is from the Hanoverian dynasty. Lost the popular support of his countrymen. This was due to his harsh attitude towards the people. The creation of an expensive standing army and increasing employment of Roman Catholics in the government, army, and the universities had angered the people. Plus, many taxes were taken away from these people, and the kings were leading a life of luxury. And the lords were leading a life of luxury. And very little was left for the peasants. They just worked and tilled the lands, but they had nothing in return. So there was a revolt against the king. The parliament removed King James II from the throne in favor of his daughter Mary II and her husband William III, Prince of Orange. Now, the autocratic rule of James II was replaced with a constitutional form of government. It showed that the parliament had the power to change the monarch. 1 minute. Parliament in any country, even today, is a very important part of our political structure. Now, after that came the American War of Independence. It will be interesting for you to know that some of the political rights that we enjoy today are the direct outcome of two very important revolutions that occurred in the latter part of the 18th century. See, Glorious Revolution. Then came the American War of Independence. They played a crucial role in the shaping of the modern world. There was the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Though these revolutions, people asserted their rights and ended exploitations. Now, around the 16th century, many Europeans had settled in America because of religious persecution in England. You see, there was religious persecution in England. As a result, many people were forced to go to the Americas, or they were sent as punishment to the Americas. So some of them were also attracted by economic opportunities. Some felt that life was better out there in Americas than in England. They had formed 13 colonies. Earlier, only 13 colonies, which had local assemblies to settle their problems. These colonies were suffering due to the British economic policy of mercantilism, through which they tried to regulate colonial commerce in the British interest. The colonies were not permitted to set up industries as it would result in competitions with the British industries like iron and textile. Same thing happened in India also. They were not allowed. And all the raw materials which were made by England was sent to India. And the Indians had to buy that particular material which came in from England, because there was see, as I told you a little earlier, that because of machines, the machines could do the work faster and produce more material. And things made out of hand took a lot of time, and they were expensive also. So what would happen? People would be forced first. The political authority would make you buy that material which came in from England. Number one, because the British were ruling our country. Number one. And number two, it was cheaper for the people to buy. As a result, what happened? The British, these countries had to suffer a lot of competition because the British industries like iron and steel, they had to export sugar, tobacco, and cotton only to England as per the prices determined by the mother country, England. This provoked opposition from the British American colonies. And by the 18th century, the wars with France and in India were proving very expensive for Britain. She needed money to fight these wars, and this was done by collecting taxes from the American colonies. And in 1765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act on all business transactions like official documents, deeds, mortgage, newspapers, and pamphlets. The revenue was used to pay the cost of maintaining 10,000 British troops in America. The act was opposed by the colonists. Riots broke out in colonial port cities. The colonial assemblies passed resolutions against the Stamp Act. The British Parliament had to repeal the Stamp Act in 1766. However, the Parliament continued the tax on tea. And on 16 December 1773, some Americans disguised as native Indians descended upon the three ships of the East India Company and dumped the tea into the sea. This was known as the Boston Tea Party. The incident is known as the Boston Tea Party. The Parliament closed the port of Boston, but the trigger was set for the American War of Independence. They were made to pay taxes, which they did not like, and tea was dumped out there. And so, what did these people do? The colonists, they dumped the tea into the sea, and this came to be known as the Boston Tea Party. This particular incident, which triggered off the American War of Independence. Now, the representatives of the 13 colonies called the meetings of the First Continental Congress at Philadelphia in 1774 and appealed to the King of England not to impose taxes without their consent. The king regarded this as an act of rebellion and declared war. This led to fight and finally to the Declaration of Independence on 4th July 1776 at a Congress at Philadelphia, which proclaimed their independence from Great Britain and the formation of a cooperative union. It inspired the whole world with its emphasis on equality, right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The Bill of Rights granted many freedoms, such as freedom of speech, press, religion, and justice under law. The American Revolution was a struggle by which the 13 American colonies won independence from Britain and gave birth to the nation that is now called the United States of America. Now, again, an activity has been given. Imagine you are a newspaper reporter who was a witness to the Boston Tea Party. Now that, see, one thing you are doing distance education, but distance education, I personally feel that sometimes, face-to-face learning is easier. But now the rule is that if you, as much as you can, go on to the distance education way of learning. But I still feel that in spite of all this, please do not treat your subject as something light, just something for giving an examination. Please make it a point to get to know more and more about your particular subject. I'm sure you'll love doing, at least I'm talking about history. Now, imagine you are a newspaper reporter who was a witness to the Boston Tea Party. You interviewed the English East India Company officials, the Americans who participated, and passers-by who had seen this particular act. Now, write a newspaper article on it, bringing out their versions of the story. Now, how will you do it? Interesting how the people were harassed because of the taxes that were levied on the people, and how tea was the material was being the tea was being used. So what did they do? First you can write about the taxes which were levied on the people, how they were feeling. Life was becoming very difficult for them. They were forced to do things which they did not want to do, and so on and so forth. And then you could come on to how you could buy, how these people really revolted, and how life became easier, and how it led to the the War of Independence, and the formation of the United States of America in 1776 on 4th of July. And also give your opinion of what must have taken place. Interesting, isn't it? So now we come to the next very important and very interesting lesson and aspect, and that is the French Revolution. Now, in the 18th century, French society was still feudal in character, with the monarch exercising complete authority. It was divided into three classes or estate: the first estate, the second estate, and the third estate. The first estate of clergy or church and the second estate of nobility enjoyed all the luxuries that were available and many privileges over religious and the governance of the country. The third estate of the commoners, such as peasantry, the city workers, and the middle class, were heavily burdened with taxes. See, it's same all over, whether it was England or it was America or now it is France. The internal conditions of France made it an ideal stage for a revolution to take place. Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, luxurious lifestyles had emptied the treasury and made the country bankrupt. Louis XVI was forced to call a meeting of representatives of the three estates, the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners in 1789. He wanted to give approval for new tax law. Now, the third estate demanded equality in taxation and abolition of special privileges enjoyed by the first two estates. It declared itself, just 1 minute, okay, itself a national assembly and took over the sovereign power from the emperor. The historic French document, Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, were adopted. It was later embodied as a preamble of the French Constitution of 1791. This was influenced by the United States Declaration of Independence, asserting the equality of all men, the sovereignty of the people, and the rights to liberty, equality, property, security, right to education, to free speech, to be informed, right of the poor to public assistance, a ban on torture and slavery, recognition of the right of the people to choose their government, and the eligibility of all citizens for employment in public offices. Now, I'll read this out to you again. It's a very important part of our development towards a modern society. Now, the French document was influenced by the United States Declaration of Independence, asserting the equality of all men, the sovereignty of the people, and the rights to liberty, that is the American War of Independence, property, security, right to education, to free speech, to be informed, right of the poor, to public assistance, a ban on torture and slavery, recognition of the right of the people to choose their government, and the eligibility of all citizens for employment in public offices. Now, the French Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars, starting from 1789 or lasting for about 15 years, resulted in the formation of the French Republic. The French Revolution tore down the medieval structure of Europe and brought in new ideas of liberalism and nationalism. France witnessed a complete change in the government, administration, military, society, and culture. France became a republic. France became a republic under Napoleon Bonaparte. The guiding principles of the French Revolution were, as I told you earlier, liberty, equality, and fraternity. The revolutionaries were inspired by the ideas of many enlightened thinkers and philosophers such as Voltaire, Montesquieu, and Rousseau. You'll read about them in your next in your class 12th. In political science, if you take up the ideas of Voltaire, Montesquieu, and Rousseau. Now, the American War of Independence and the French Revolution popularized the feelings of nationalism all over the world. The idea of nationalism from America, France, and Britain influenced the Italians also. The result was a revolution for a unified kingdom of Italy in 1861. The unification of Italy and Germany. Both Italy and Germany were divided into very small states. And under Bismarck and Cavour, Garibaldi, they were made into a very large, into one big empire. Now, again, an activity has been given over here. The flags of France and America, count the number of stars in the American map. What do you think it represents? Of course, it represents the states. Now, we come to this is one of the very interesting unification of Italy and Germany. In the 18th century, Italy was a collection of states, small states like Lombardy and Vienna, and all these, each having its own monarch and traditions. Some of them were Venetia, two Sicilies, papal states of Sardinia, Tuscany during the Middle Ages. The Pope increased their influence in both religious and political matters. Even today, the Pope is a very important feature in the church. The Pope established their own political rule in what were called the papal states. Soon, Italy began to grow in importance.